Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Open Championship Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into. We're going to look at a lot of the historical Open Championships, especially 2014, which is the last time Hoylake hosted the Open Championship. But we're going to look at a lot of previous Open Championships, figure out if we can see what statistics, metrics, and types of golfers we want to focus on, who generally plays the best at Open Championships. We'll give you an inside look at the research that I did today and posted to social media, and of course go through Fantasy National and figure out the players that are excellent at the metrics that we focus on or want to focus on for the Open Championship. So a few quick reminders. This is a double tournament week, so in addition to tonight's show and the Wednesday night DFS Tactics show, there will be a full show for the Barracuda Championship. That's right, research, data, and DFS all in one show. That'll be tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight. So if you have any interest in wagering or playing in the DFS contest for the Barracuda, then make sure you set your reminders and notifications that the Barracuda Championship full show will be tomorrow. I mentioned this last night, but I'll do it tonight and Wednesday. I do not collect stats from the DP World Tour. I do not follow any of those players closely unless they come over and play stateside or in a PGA Tour event. So if you are looking for specific information or insight into a DP World Tour player, I'm going to suggest that you go and find other content creators, and there are a lot of great content creators out there that will have that information for you. I'm just being honest and transparent with you that any insight that I give on a DP World Tour player would be superficial. It would be taken from statistics online, say from the DP World Tour site or anything like that. So if that's what you are looking for, I won't be able to help you. I'd much rather just be open, honest, and upfront with you from the start. And then second to last for this intro, unscripted part of the intro, I'm going to be starting up a kick stream, trying to get on a routine, regular, full week schedule, meaning some research streams and some gaming streams during the mornings and afternoons. Hopefully that means the Friday night chill stream will come back as well. Do a little bit of showdown content on Friday night chill streams, which have a couple of members of the community here have had a lot of success with Showdown lately, so I'm hoping to get back into that content as well. So if you are interested in any of that content, Showdown, gaming, intense research, I say intense, the stream will be very relaxed, music in the background, but I myself will be very deep into the numbers. If you're interested in any of that, then give me a follow over at Kick. I'm going to try Kick out. Was not too successful with Twitch. I'm going to try out Kick and see how that goes. So give me a follow over there. And then bear with me, the last little part of this intro, quite sentimental, but when preparing for the stream and the show tonight, realized that I hit 100 subscribers, and it really does mean a lot. It's still a very, very small channel, but it started with me broadcasting to my parents, and then has grown to 100 subscribers and seemingly many more who watch the videos and comment and like the content that I put out. And I really do appreciate it. I've enjoyed going down this road, and I'm looking forward to continuing to make content that you all enjoy. We can all have a laugh at some of the horrendous recommendations that I give you all. Do have a couple of decent ones every once in a while, but honestly, thank you sincerely for all the support the past couple of years. And for making 100 subscribers possible. Really do appreciate it. So with that gooey and all that nonsense out of the way, let's get into the regular intro and the meat and potatoes of the show, shall we? So all statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. It has all of the statistics and historical data that you need at your fingertips to be able to organize and arrange however you see fit to be able to give you the best opportunity to hit your wagers and to come out on top on these DFS contests. It really is the best tool out there. Go check them out, fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my Twitter and Instagram, where I did post some research around the Open Championship earlier today, some trends from the past 10 winners going back to 2012. So if you want to see the research that I found for the Open Championship, give me a follow at your preferred social media site, Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is also where I post my betting cards weekly for the PGA Tour. If you want to see the wagers that I put up with my own money, then give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I do some baseball content. It's been very hit and miss lately, as the summer is pretty hectic for me. But if you want to see some quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter as well. Gabe's Twitter is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. We have worked pretty closely together now for the past 3 or so months. We've each had some success. When you get two analytic minds working together, usually going to happen. The article called The Fringe is a very good read, especially for the beginning of the week to prepare you for the tournament of the week. So go give Gabe a follow over at Twitter and subscribe to his article called The Fringe, which if you subscribe, you will be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk after calls on Wednesday night. With that said, he did let me know that the chat is up in the air, so to say, this Wednesday, as he and his family have some plans. But if they return from those plans at a decent hour, he said he was going to get the chat going. So not sure if the chat's going to go, but calls on Wednesday night will still happen. So we will have all your DFS needs covered for Wednesday night. And then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. Have you made any wagers for the Open Championship? Who are you focused on early in your research for DFS? Do you have any 6K plays that you want to throw out there? So jump in chat, join the discussion. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 Open Championship. And we're going to start with what we normally do on a data dive show, which is over at Windfinder. Awaken, thank you for jumping in chat. Yes, the last major of the season. Very much appreciative of you jumping in chat. You have been here for quite a while. Again, with the sentimental, much appreciated for the support that you've shown the channel, even though the channel is still small. Hopefully your Scottish Open and Barbasol went well. Haven't seen you in chat for a little while, so would be good to catch up. But we are trying to build some momentum after a good week last week. Still didn't cross the pay line in the positive, but certainly built some momentum, some very solid suggestions, one or two killer ones that really tanked the week. But good stuff there. Ready for the last major of the year. As you can see, the forecast has updated and changed from last night's initial research show. The forecast for Thursday and Friday still fairly light in terms of wind, especially considering over in the UK and Scotland we're still looking at highs in the 60s. The major change, and I mentioned this last night, is that it looked like there was a weather system that was going to be moving in later on in the weekend and late in or early next week. You see the winds have now been increased drastically, at least by forecast, for Liverpool. Remember, we are right outside Liverpool. We are at Hoylake and Royal Liverpool Golf Course, so I am going to prevent myself from getting tongue-tied. I'm just going to say Hoylake. but a lot of wind in the forecast. So we're definitely going to be looking at some wind metrics tonight that we did not do last night based on the forecast. But here is the updated wind finder forecast, and of course we will update this Wednesday before, or at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show, and it's going to be very important that you keep on top of the forecast for Hoylake and Liverpool, as the Open Championship is one golf tournament that is strictly, the difficulty of the Open Championship is based a lot around the weather, is how I'm trying to phrase this. So make sure you stay on top of the forecast. But there's that from Windfinder. Before we go to Fantasy National, I mentioned last night that I did not have the GCSA tournament fact sheet. I didn't think we were going to be able to get that, so I wasn't able to give you green sizes or anything to that effect. This is courtesy of Josh Culp over at Twitter. He is at Future of Fantasy, and I will put that in the description, I'm sorry. I'm going to put this in chat, and I'll need to add a comment or put it in the description for you all. This is Josh Culp at Future of Fantasy. He is with Roto World, so I'm going to see if I can't make this a little bit easier to see. Let's see if that or this. Yeah, this will be easier. So won't see the extreme top of this, but it looks just like the GCSA tournament fact sheet. I don't know where he got this, but this is courtesy of Josh Culp and put on his Twitter earlier. Hoylake, we mentioned, it is a par 71. Measures at 7,383 yards, so that part is exactly the same from last night's show. What we are gaining tonight with seeing this data, average green size, almost 6,500 square feet. And that is, I would think, a little bit small for our typical Open Championship venues. In fact, the Scottish Open, the number I saw on those greens were 7,000 square feet. So these are slightly larger than the PGA Tour average, but not by much. And there are some small greens here. So we saw that greens in regulation are probably going to be a pretty big part. I think it's just going to be amplified by the fact that these greens generally are on the small side for an Open Championship venue. You see the acres of fairway, only 22. That would be pretty low on the PGA Tour, let alone for the Open Championship. A lot of these landing areas are very, very narrow. So premium on accuracy here at Hoylake. And I want to gravitate your attention here. Acres of maintained rough. We only generally see acres of rough. This is acres of maintained rough, and only 15. So there are thin strips or thin layers of, say a first cut of rough. But if you are very wayward at Hoylake, you are going to be in some thick, deep stuff very, very quickly. Not to mention there are several holes that have internal out of bounds. And there's been a picture circulating on Twitter as well that shows the internal out of bounds on 18 is about 3 or 4 yards off the fairway. It is ridiculously close to the fairway. So an extreme emphasis on accuracy this week, especially off the tee. No holes with water in play. 84 bunkers is actually quite a small amount for the Open Championship, I would guess. I don't have any figures around that. But these bunkers are very penal. The saying it is difficult to play out of, deep-faced bunkers, what you would expect from an Open Championship style bunker. Turf. This is really, really interesting, where last night I mentioned that they had bent, fescue, and POA listed on some of them. Here it's just listed as bent grass and fescue. But what I want to denote your attention to is this first additional note here. All playing areas are overseeded with fescue, paths with ryegrass, greens overseeded with brown top bent grass. So I sent a message or text to my friend who I've mentioned on the show before. We call him Bobo. He is the greenskeeper at our local municipal. Another supporter of the channel. So thanks, Bobo, for that. But I sent a message to him. I did not hear back before the show, asking how much overseed has an effect on what the green surface is. Because if the greens are all overseeded with this bent grass, would it be fair to look at bent grass putting? So, unfortunately, I don't have that answer for you. He would know much, much better than I, since he is an actual agronomist. But I am thinking that perhaps we might be able to gain an advantage by looking at some purely bent grass putting. So I am wagering, or thinking about doing that tonight. Let me know what you think in chat. And then in the comments, if you're not able to catch live, I'll make sure to look at bent grass and putting in general. But because of this little note here around the overseeding of bent grass on the greens, I'm thinking we might be able to look at bent grass putting. But that is the limited amount of what looks like a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. And I wanted to make sure I gave credit where it's due. This is from Josh Culp over on Twitter at Future Fantasy. He works with Roto World, excuse me. But this is what I have for you this evening in terms of a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. You see in chat Botrix, that is the start of me attempting to integrate to Kick, so don't worry about the Botrix chat there. So there's a look at what can be defined as a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. So now we'll move to Fantasy National. And because of the forecast that we saw with Windfinder, let me set this back to the beginning of 2022. And while it doesn't look like it's going to be terribly windy for Thursday and Friday, we definitely saw Saturday and Sunday the wind really picked up according to the forecast. So our top performers in moderate and windy conditions in the past 18 months or so, going back to the beginning of 2022, Justin Thomas, Sung Jae, Joaquin Neiman, Tony Finau, Scotty Scheffler, Cam Smith, John Rahm, Keegan Bradley, Xander, and Matt Fitzpatrick are our top 10 in terms of total performance in windy conditions. We'll scroll on down just a little bit, and I'm sure, depending on what the forecast is for Wednesday, we'll hit this at the beginning of the show as well. But scrolling on down, let you see about the top 25 or so there. Rory, Shane Lowry, Max Homa, Chris Kirk, Sam Burns. These are your top players in the wind, and if this forecast holds, or if the winds increase, then these are players you definitely want to consider in your wagers, in your lineups this week for the Open Championship. Let's do a couple of other quick reviews here. We'll look at some strokes gained approach. We'll look at some putting. We're not going to do anything specific with Hoylake, especially in Fantasy National. As mentioned this last night, Fantasy National still has the 2014 scorecard. Hoylake has changed since then with the inclusion of a brand new 17th hole. The penultimate hole is now a very short par 3. So nothing looking directly from Hoylake. So we'll do some strokes gained approach. I don't see off the tee being much of a factor other than fairways gained. So that's where I want to put a whole lot of my emphasis with that. But strokes gained approach, our top approach players this calendar year are Scotty Scheffler, Rory, John Rahm. Well, it would help if I sort it. Scheffler, Rahm, Morikawa, Ricky Fowler, Xander, Tony Finau, Wyndham Clark, Gary Woodland, Hideki, Rory, and Tom Hoge. Those are your top 11 approach players. Again, we're going to skip around the green. I think it's going to be more so scrambling that we want to look at. We might come back to around the green, but what we do know, regardless of how we classify these greens, what we do know is that these greens are going to be Velcro. They're going to be slow. That's typically how it plays over in Scotland and in the UK. Just due to the amount of wind, you have to be able to let these balls come to rest. We saw that actually on the 72nd hole with Rory and how the wind was oscillating the golf balls at rest and whatnot. So they have to keep these greens slow. So our top putters on slow greens, and this is the filter I would be most comfortable with right now if I were making my mixed condition model. We'll look at bent as well, but right now this is what I would be most confident in. On slow greens, Velcro speed greens, going back all the way to 2019 because there are so few rounds that are classified as Velcro speed. Our top putters on slow greens: Denny McCarthy, Andrew Putnam, Lee Hodges, Patrick Reed, Chris Kirk, Jordan Spieth, Emiliano Grillo, Dustin Johnson, JT Poston, and Mateo Fernandez de Oliveira. I mean, McCarthy and Putnam, just, world-class putters. Patrick Reed, Jordan Spieth generally have success at the Open Championship. DJ's had some success at the Open Championship, so it's good to see that list there. If indeed I get the go-ahead from Bobo, from my friend, that it's okay or beneficial to look at bent green putting just due to the fact of this overseed, we're going to bring this to, I guess, just 2022. Even though we can say for certain that these are Velcro, there are not enough rounds on just Velcro bent. And I probably should have showed you that. I mean, we'd have to go back. I mean, this is 2019, the same time frame we just looked for Velcro. If we were to do it on bent, there are none. There are no rounds. So instead, I think let's try average. Let's see if there's enough rounds there. Not really. But I think it's going to have to be okay, because if we include all bent, that's going to include Augusta, which is lightning. It's going to include Muirfield, which is lightning. And these are definitely not lightning speed greens. So we're going to start with Velcro and average, and really it's just average speed bent greens. Your top putters: Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, Tommy Fleetwood, Scott Stallings, Sahith Theegala, Andrew Putnam, Brandon Grace, Tom Kim, Yannick Paul, Patrick Reed, and Adam Scott. So a little bit of overlap here. Andrew Putnam, Patrick Reed, Jordan Spieth just outside the top 10 in terms of average speed bent green putting. Again, I do not like the idea of using just bent in the mixed condition model, but if these indeed do play similar to bent greens as in the US, take it with a little bit of grain of salt. Again, there are some rounds that are classified as lightning in this data set that I'm about to tell you. The Memorial, the US Open's generally lightning. The John Deere's generally fast. So this isn't going to be good for speed, but it is the surface type. Our top bent green putters since the beginning of 2022: Denny McCarthy, Keegan Bradley, Brendan Todd, Christian Bezaidnu, Cam Smith, Patrick Cantlay, Terrell Hatton, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, and Justin Rose. So again, a little bit more overlap here. I believe Keegan was up there for Velcro speed greens and now for bent. Cantlay's been up there in 2 of the 3. McCarthy, just an all-world putter in general. Poston was up there in I believe the Velcro. He's just outside the top 10 here in bent. So a lot of overlap. Hopefully that gives you an idea on who to focus for putting perhaps this week for the Open Championship at Hoylake. That's going to do it for the review. Let's go ahead and jump to Microsoft Excel. I'm going to keep this timeline here. I'm not sure how far back we're going to go. But what I really want to do, and it's going to be a little bit difficult in some regards as opposed to other tournaments, is since the Open Championship rotates and we don't get a whole lot of the data since we are in Scotland and the United Kingdom, I will give you the statistics that we do have, and we'll try to compare it against other full field courses like we do on a Data Dive show. When we look at this chart here, we'll go to the detail a lot of times, like we did for the Barbasol, we'll do for the 3M next week. This is exactly the same thing as my detail page here, the raw numbers. This is just from every Open Championship going back to 2012. I am very uncomfortable with these two metrics here. Off the tee and approach. This is the only year it was gathered, back in 2019. They didn't collect around the green and putting that year. I did keep it in there because they gathered the stats. I'm just not confident in them, so I'm just treating these as basically null, just like this. But I think this off the tee number is really, really high, and I think that would probably be an outlier if we had the data for all Open Championships. So instead, let's go ahead and move to the driving and fairways and greens page view. You see across all 10 Open Championships, distance has been a 9.5. That is on par with the Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is about a 9.6. So this is about 9% more important than the average full field course on the PGA Tour. I'm going to tell you now, I don't see distance being a major factor because there's a lot of layups here at Hoylake. Again, these fairways are narrow, and a lot of the Open Championships are really course dependent. For example, when we were at Carnoustie in 2018, distance really didn't matter at all. Down here in 2014 at Muirfield, Muirfield in 2013, 0.16. I mean, basically had zero factor. Hoylake last time was a 13.2. It did have a little bit, but Hoylake has changed. It's now a par 71, so I don't want to put too much emphasis into that. So distance, at least across the previous 10 Open Championships, slightly higher than full field course average, but not enough that I would dictate or think that it demands a lot of a look in the mixed condition model. Fairways, surprisingly, at least surprisingly for me, are below full field course average. It's a little bit higher than the Players, and the Players is, let's see, let me go to there. Players is 11.5% less important. So my guess is this number is going to put it at around 8% less important than the full field course average on the PGA Tour. Now again, I think this is a bit misleading, as fairways are going to be pretty darn important this week. And when we look at previous Open Championships, Hoylake here, Royal Liverpool, it was the second highest in terms of fairways gained, only behind 2012 and the Royal St. Anne's. So I do think fairways are going to be a pretty integral part. It's the facet of driving that I'm going to be focused on, along with good drives gained. We'll get to that here in a second. But I definitely am preferring the fairway finders as opposed to the distance players this week at Hoylake. There's a look at fairways gained. Good drives gained, 2.4, 2.42. That is still above average for the PGA Tour full field course averages. And look at this number from Hoylake in 2014, 3.07, very high. That number alone, 3.07, just under the Scottish, and that was a major factor of the mixed condition model last week. It's right on par with the Wells Fargo. So the Wells Fargo, in terms of good drives gained, is 29% more important. So yes, I do think good drives gained are going to be a pretty big facet again this week, like it was for the Scottish. And the greens in regulation here, this is a pretty big number. I think that's right there. So yeah, 4.19, a big number. It's almost it is one full shot or one full point higher than the average full field course. Again, the Open Championship is course based on how it's going to play. I see this as a good drives gained. Greens, again, we saw, thanks to Josh Culp and his GCSA tournament fact sheet, or what looked like one from Twitter, that these greens are probably pretty small in terms of other Open Championship venues. So greens gained might be something that we want to put some focus on. Just off the top, let's see, scrolling in. Yeah, so Hoylake was third most in terms of greens gained across the past 10 Open Championships. So there's a look at the driving, fairways and greens page view in Fantasy National for the past 10 Open Championships. We're going to have some good drives gained and some greens. That's where our focus is going to be this week for the Open Championship. Good evening, P. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. We have two pretty long-time supporters here. If you missed the intro, a little bit sentimental, I did hit the 100 subscribers earlier today. And P, you've been here for a long time, so it wouldn't be possible without support like yours. Very, very appreciative the past 2+ years. And we're gonna keep it going even through all of the mistakes and terrible suggestions I give you. But appreciate the support. Thanks for jumping in chat. We moved to scoring, and I mentioned how I was pretty undetermined or undecided on what I was going to do with scoring last night when we went through a little bit of Hoylake. You see that birdies and bogeys have been pretty even. I think you can see that. No, of course you can't, because I've been in the wrong page view. Again, you all support me, and I still do dumb shit like this. So yeah, 2.92 and a 2.99, pretty even. And both of those numbers would be higher than the full field course average. In fact, birdies is slightly under. Bogeys is higher. Bogeys avoided is slightly higher than the full field course average. So again, as I mentioned last night, I would lean bogeys avoided, but I don't really have a strong feeling as to which way I'm going to lean. In fact, for Hoylake in 2014, you see both of them were extremely important. The bogeys did take a little bit of precedence, but both, I think these might be the highest numbers for either moving forward. So last year, St. Andrews had a slightly higher birdies gained, but the bogeys avoided was highest here at Hoylake for these Open Championships. So don't know how I'm feeling about the scoring. A lot of it might dictate based on the weather forecast as well. As I mentioned through the Scottish last week, the windier it got, I see it more difficult, easier, or less wind, the easier I saw it. So might have to hold off in saying anything definitive. We'll look at a few things in Fantasy National, probably opportunities gained as well, but no real definite favor in terms of birdies or bogeys the past 10 Open Championships. Moving to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. I don't want to get too hung up on the lengths. As you see, a lot of times we don't have the performance of the specific lengths, and if we did, it was all just lumped into one category. Instead, I'm just going to be looking at par 3s, 4s, and 5s in general. Par 3s are at a 1.23. Par 5s are 1.37. Now, this is, again, for all Open Championships. I think the par 3s are going to carry a little bit more weight this week. There are only 3 par 5s here at Hoylake now because they converted the 10th to a long par 4. And as we'll look at Fantasy National and the breakdown, Par 3s carried quite a bit of weight in 2014 and in 2006. In fact, I can show you that here. Hoylake, 1.49 in terms of the par 3s, slightly higher than the Open Championship average. We had a couple of years where par 3s were really important. What is this? Is this Carnoustie? No. So Birkdale and Troon, the par 3s were very important. And then Hoylake. And in fact, Muirfield in 2013, par 3s were extremely important. Again, in 2014, the par 5s were extremely important. But again, I'm going to think that the par 5s are a little bit less now. There's one less of them. The course has changed. Having said that, the par 5s are still going to carry some weight. This might actually be the highest par 5 it is. It is the highest par 5 by a decent amount from when Hoylake last hosted in 2014. And then lastly, the par 4s are just going to be very, very important. A 5.56. To give you an idea, 5.5 would be upwards of the highest. So the highest par 4 is the Travelers and the Sony. And the Sony, the par 4s are extremely important because it's a par 70. So those are only 5.1s. This is a 5.56. So 4/10 of a shot more important than the two most important places on the PGA Tour. Par 4s are going to carry significant weight. Majority of the par 4s do fall 455 here at Hoylake, so I imagine if we separate out a range, it would be that range. All right, I did want to show you the raw detail, the raw data, for as much as it's going to be worth. Take however much or however little you want. I think there are some good facets there, and there are some things you have to understand that we have limited data. Let me pull up one other file here really quickly. I meant to have up for you all. That way we can refer back to it. We had it last night, what I call the new course, even though Hoylake's not a new course. I'll bring up the whole composition chart for the new scorecard for Hoylake this year. You see we have 4 par 3s. The very short, brand new 17th measures 136. We have a 175 to 200 and 2 par 3s, 200 to 225 at Hoylake this year. The par 4s, one, I'm going to call it optional drivable hole. I think it measures 366. It can be reached off the tee, but there is a lot of penalty or just nonsense around that green. The very prudent play is to lay up and leave yourself still with a wedge in. So 2 short par 4s, 1 long. The converted 10th is now at 507 as a par 4. Majority of our par 4s this year at Hoylake are 455. And then I will swivel out of the way. Our par 5s, we have 1 extremely short, 500 to 550, 2 from 600 to 650 in terms of par 5. So there's a look at the whole composition chart. Thanks to the Open scorecard. This is from Pro Visualizer. Just a reminder that they set every single par 5 as a true 3-shot hole. So the short par 5, I would imagine you could probably put into the 200 plus as under I would expect the worst of circumstances, worst of conditions. Players aren't able to try for that green in 2. But we would have a couple of short wedges for those par 5s, a few, a little bit longer approach wedges on those short par 4s. Majority of the approach shots estimated by Pro Visualizer falls in the 150 to 175 range. I'm not going to do anything in terms of proximity. We don't get proximity data for the Open Championships. These greens are small. I just don't feel comfortable using any proximity this week, but I did want to give you this as well. Good evening, Joey. Thanks for jumping in chat. What's the stats for Chariot Run Thursday? I I'm going to tell you, my stats are you're going to give me a lot of shots. That is what those stats are. But thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I am looking forward to our round Thursday over at Chariot Run, which is a pretty nice course in our area. So Joey will be able to jump in chat next week and tell you just how bad it gets for me personally, because it's going to be bad. But thanks for jumping in chat, Joey. Much appreciated. So there's a look at the scorecard and the estimated proximities for Hoylake this year. After looking at what we did in Microsoft Excel with the past Open Championships and this whole composition chart and whatnot, now we'll go back to Fantasy National. I will make sure to fix the page view for you all. We'll go back to Fantasy National. We'll go through these page views and we'll get a sense of 6,500 on DK. That is very generous of you, P. I should be about 2,000. That is about what I am. But I appreciate the kind pricing. Yet someone done messed up if I'm 6,500 on DraftKings. So we'll come to the birdies and bogeys scoring page view here in Fantasy National. And again, I'm still not confident in using either of these two for the Open Championship, especially if the wind picks up. If the wind picks up, I think I would lean more so towards bogeys avoided and then thinking it's going to be difficult. Instead, let's go ahead and look at opportunities. And with that, it's probably going to be a bit narrow, but let's take a look at opportunities gained in the wind, only because we've seen that the wind looks like it's going to pick up at least on the weekend, and it could pick up Thursday and Friday as well. So in the past 18 months, our top opportunities gained players in the wind have been Cameron Young, JT, Tony Finau, Cam Smith, Tom Hoge, Russell Henley, Adam Scott, Jordan Spieth, Lee Hodges, Hideki, and Keegan Bradley. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is just spur of the moment. I really kind of like seeing the names that I do here in this top 10. Cameron Young, his one performance at the Open Championship last year at the Old Course, St. Andrews, finishes solo second. He's number one in opportunities. Cam Smith, defending Open champion. Tom Hoge had a pretty darn good Scottish Open last week. Spieth and his Open Championship prowess. Keegan's played well. I mean, Rory just outside the top 10 in terms of opportunities in the wind. Again, on the spur of the moment, I do like seeing this list here. Gives me a little bit of confidence in that opportunities gained might be something worth looking at. You can always argue the filter, but this opportunities in the wind looks like it was pretty decent. If, and I'm going to clarify this with a massive if, the winds do pick up and we see winds projected in the 30 mile an hour like we saw for a portion of Saturday, then I do think this is going to get very difficult. So if the winds pick up, your top bogey avoiders when a round has been difficult since the beginning of 2022, Scotty Scheffler, Matt Fitzpatrick, Rory, Shane Lowry, Tommy Fleetwood, Jason Day, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Wyndham Clark, Brendan Todd, and Tom Hoge. Tim Hoge. I don't know who that is, but Tom Hoge. Again, I'm only going to be using this if the weather forecast updates, especially by Wednesday and whatnot. It looks like it's going to be very windy all tournament long. Then I would be more comfortable with bogeys when it's difficult. But really, I don't think it's going to play easy. This is still a major championship after all. The wind is still going to be there. I don't think it's going to play easy, so I don't think I want to look at birdies gained. I wouldn't want to look at anything easy to par. We'll take a look at birdies gained when it's easy. I suppose that could be something as well. If I said easy, I meant birdies gained when it's difficult. So our top birdies gained players when a round has been difficult has been Rory, Cam Smith, Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, Sahith Theegala, Wyndham Clark, Keegan, Xander, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Jordan Spieth. How has Gooch looked? Well, it's really hard to say just because he's been at Live. Now, the two tournaments he has played in this calendar year, so this is actually going back to 2022, he's been good at giving himself opportunities when it's difficult. He's actually been pretty darn good when it's difficult. I wonder how this changes for just this calendar year. And that's going to be the challenge with the Live guys, because I don't know if I'm going to be using difficult to par, and that's what I've used, especially for the PGA Championship and for the Open or for the US Open, because we knew that those tournaments were going to be difficult. I would have to guess these are going to be difficult, but I really can't say for certain. Now, his two tournaments, he's not been particularly great. He's been subpar in bogeys, been subpar in birdies gained. He has given himself a few opportunities. I believe he missed at the PGA and then a middling finish, but 34th at the Masters. He played well at the Open last year at St. Andrews, but I really do think St. Andrews is one of the easier Open venues. And I think Hoylake's going to play much more difficult than St. Andrews, so I don't have a good feeling about Gooch coming in, at least, in an initial thought. Kicking butt on Live, he's won 3 times. I mean, if you, that's fine. That's just the difficulty of going to Live. I just don't have those Live stats. I just don't. In terms of wind, we can check that from 2022, or at least that's the time frame that I would use. He wasn't in the top 10 for strokes gained in moderate and windy conditions. He's 62nd. It hadn't been great. It hadn't been terrible, but it hadn't been great. He had a bad PGA in the wind, apparently. He was really bad at the Players, although last year the Players was horrendous. Moderate and windy. I think you might have missed. You didn't jump in chat for the wind finder portion, but there are forecasts for Saturday with 30 mile an hour sustained winds. 17 mile an hour sustained winds is windy AF. I don't know what moderate is, but now Thursday and Friday, at least forecast wise, is not very windy at all. So that's why I'm using both the moderate and windy filter. It's not just windy, because the wind is not up until the weekend, at least the forecast that we saw. So yeah, I don't have a great feeling on Taylor Gooch, not for the Open Championship this year. But I'm just going to be low on Live players in general because I don't have their stats. That's as simple as I can put it. But he wouldn't be one of the top Live players I would consider. We'll move to driving, fairways and greens. We saw that fairways, I'm definitely going to be focused on the fairways gained players as opposed to the distance players. Having said that, we're going to look at some good drives gained and some greens. And again, without a strong feeling of whether this is going to be easy or difficult, we're just going to look at this in the wind. We can look at it in long rough as well, especially for good drives gained. Greens too, I suppose. We'll look at long rough as well. But in moderate and windy conditions, our top good drives gained players the past 18 plus months or so: Corey Connors, Xander, Shane Lowry, Sung Jae, Tom Hoagie, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Emiliano Grillo, Gary Woodland, and Chris Kirk. Our top greens and regulation gained players in moderate and windy conditions: Corey Connors, Xander, Sung Jae, John Rahm, Tony Finau, Shane Lowry, Justin Thomas, Scotty Scheffler, Emiliano Grillo, and Gary Woodland. So there's a look at those two in the wind. We'll look at long rough and look at some good drives gained and some greens. So in long rough, which I don't even know if this is going to be classified as long rough on Fantasy National, just because they do have, kind of a I can't call it a step cut, but they have a cut of rough that they maintain, and then they just don't maintain the grounds beyond that. So I don't know if it's going to be considered long rough by Fantasy National. But in long rough, going back to the beginning of 2022, our top good drives gained players: Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Emiliano Grillo, Tony Finau, Russell Henley, probably the first time we've said him tonight, Scotty Scheffler, Xander, Joaquin Niemann, Abraham Ancer, and Sung Jae. So a couple of live players there. Our top greens and regulation players, greens and regulation gained players when rough is long: Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Connors, Finau, Rahm, Homa, Henley, Morikawa, Rose, and Grillo. So I'm definitely focused on these two aspects on this page view, but we're definitely going to be looking at some scrambling too. If we look at the course breakdown, scrambling percentage here at Hoylake in 2014 and in 2006, right at 50%, whereas the PGA Tour average is 57.5%. So very, very difficult to scramble here. That's why I've got such an emphasis on accuracy this week. But if players are having to scramble, I don't like the idea of using long rough, because this fairway cut, this is link style golf, fairway cut can extend around the green. Let's just look at scrambling just in general, I suppose. Yeah. Feel free to jump into chat if you feel like there should be a filter on this, but the way I look at it, I'm just kind of looking at scrambling just in general. So our top scramblers this calendar year: Jason Day, Ben On, coming off a very impressive Scottish Open; Brendan Todd, Hideki, Alex Noren, Matt Fitzpatrick, Harris English, Adam Schenk, Brian Harmon, Brooks, and Minwoo Lee. So there's a look at our top scramblers. Those are the three areas that I'll be focused on this page view. Much more so the good drives gained and the greens. I really want to put an emphasis on the accuracy. Scrambling will be a portion of the mixed condition model. I don't know how much, just because scrambling is so difficult here at Hoylake, or at least it has been in the previous two Open Championships that we have data for. All right, moving into 3s, 4s, and 5s. Not going to spend a whole lot of time here, and we have nothing on proximity. If you want to believe Pro Visualizer, then your top 150 to 175 proximity players this calendar year: Xander, Grillo, Hovland, Siwoo Kim, Tom Hoge, Sepp Straka, Scheffler, Rahm, Spieth, and Cameron Young. I myself am not going to do anything with proximity this week, but Pro Visualizer had the vast majority of approach shots estimated from 150 to 175. So if you want to put some stock into that, there are your top performers in proximity for that range. Now we'll move to par 3s. I don't think there's going to be any specific length. Again, I'll bring this up. Gosh dang it, it's skewed. So just remember, we have one under 150 par 3. We have one from 175 to 200. We have two from 200 to 225. I'm not going to single out any particular length in the par 3s. Instead, we'll just look strokes gained par 3. Our top par 3 performers this calendar year: Rahm, Homa, Fowler, Sam Burns, Adam Schenk, Nikolai Højgaard, Scotty Scheffler, Grillo, Fleetwood, and Siwoo Kim. Moving to par 4s. We're going to have a bit of emphasis in strokes gained par 4. We saw in Excel just how important those were. So our top strokes gained par 4 players: Scheffler, Hatton, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Rory, McCarthy, Victor Hovland, Jason Day, Jon Rahm, and Wyndham Clark. There is still a possibility I will separate the 450 to 500 since it is just off to the left of your screen here. See if I can't bring this over a little bit. That's not what I wanted to do at all. See if I can't bring this over. There we go. So there's our par 4s. You can see the vast majority are from 450 to 5. So that will be the range that I separate out if I separate it out. I don't know if I'm going to do that yet. With that said, our top par 4 performers from 450 to 500 this calendar year: Scheffler, Hovland, Cantlay, Ryan Fox, Xander, Rory, Wyndham Clark, Tyrrell Hatton, Siwoo Kim, and Nick Taylor. So several players overlapping both top 10 in par 4s in total and of the length. Scheffler and Hovland and Cantlay, Xander, Rory, Wyndham Clark, and Tyrrell Hatton. You'd have to give an honorable mention to Nick Taylor. He's top 20 in total par 4s, 10th at the length here at Hoylake. Max Homa is an honorable mention. Brooks Koepka is an honorable mention. Jason Day is an honorable mention. Denny McCarthy and Ricky Fowler are honorable mentions. Any honorable mention is top 20 in one, top 10 in another, or top 20 in both in the case of Max Homa and Brooks. So those are the players that are going to rise a decent amount in my mixed condition model just because of the emphasis of par 4s as well from Microsoft Excel. And then if the specific length matters, they might get even more of a boost. Lastly, for par 5s, our top par 5 performers this calendar year: Jon Rahm, Cantlay, Scheffler, Ricky Fowler, Wyndham Clark, Jordan Spieth, Tommy Fleetwood, Colin Morikawa, Sungjae, and Andrew Putnam. I think the par 5s will have a little bit of bearing, but I am going to back them off in terms of importance. This is the strokes gained by hole by par. We went through this last night, but I'll do it very quickly tonight. Remember, Hoylake has been a par 72, so there were 4 par 5s the 2 years that we have stats. Now that it's a par 71, we have 1 less par 3. I do not see the par 5s carrying as much significance, but I want you to pay attention to the par 3s. This is for the top 10s. The top 5s, par 3s were the most important, even more so than the par 5s. Now for the winners, they were really taking advantage of the par 5s, but the par 3s were still more important than the par 4s. So that's why I think the par 3s are going to carry some significance this week. I'm going to have a little bit in each of these. I do think the par 5s will be slightly mitigated from what these graphs are showing since it is now a par 71. All right. That is it for the Fantasy National portion. We're going to go back to the strokes gained page view. We'll go to Microsoft Excel to wrap up the show, bring up the early look, and we'll take a look at a few of the players that have stood out in these various metrics that we have seen we think are going to play important at Hoylake this week. So we're going to start with good drives gained. And again, a reminder, this is performance at all Open Championships going back to 2012, not just at Hoylake in 2014. So some of this is course dependent. I don't want to put extra emphasis on it, but these players have at least through the years shown that they are astute enough to play or to be good at the metrics I think are going to play well for an Open Championship. And historically, have played well at Open Championships. Right off the bat, our top good drives gained players, Henrik Stenson and Molinari, 2 players that have played a lot of Open Championships. Both of them have won an Open Championship, so that's comforting to see. Stenson and Molinari. Adam Scott, a lot of success, 9 for 10, average finish inside the top 30. Cam Young, his spectacular debut in the Open Championship last year. Scotty Scheffler. There's Taylor Gooch. He has been very good at good drives gained. Victor Paris, Cantlay, Tony Finau is 6 for 6, average finish of 17th. Very strong performances at the Open Championship. He's doing it very well, or he's doing very well in good drives gained, and he's got some distance, so Finau might be somebody to key in on. Noren has played well. Hideki, a little bit less so. Surprising, Fitzpatrick has not really played Open Championships all that well. He is 5 for 7, but look at the average finish, 55th. Zach Johnson, Open champion. Jordan Spieth, 9 for 9, average finish the same as Tony Finau's, 17th. So obviously he's enjoyed Open Championship success. I will look at some greens in regulation as well. So our top greens gained players at Open Championships: Stinson, Adam Scott, Patrick Cantlay, Scotty Scheffler. Arnault has been good at greens, but you see the performance has not lined up. Tagala, Molinex each only one time. There's John Rahm, there's Spieth, Molinari a little bit further down, Taylor Gooch, Tony Finau, Louis, Justin Rose, Connors only 2 for 3, Fleetwood, Rory, Hovland 2 for 2, spectacular finishes, but only 2 for 2. So there's a look at the greens. I'm not going to do anything with scoring. Again, like I said, I'm not confident where I'm going to go with that yet. So we'll take a look at 3s, 4s, and 5s, and then the par 4s, 450 to 5. Top par 3 performers at historical Open Championships: Bezuidenhout, Patrick Cantlay, Morikawa, Cam Young, Wyndham Clark only one time, Scotty Scheffler 2 for 2. There's Scott and Stinson and Day. DJ has done very well at the par 3s in Open Championships. Keegan, only 5 for 9, but he's played the par 3s fairly well. Ricky Fowler's been very good at Open Championships, 8 for 9. Shane Lowry, former champion. Shubhankar Sharma, 2 for 2, for what it's worth. Richard Bland, 2 for 3. Okay. I'm going to skip the 4s. We're going to go to the 5s, and then I'll come back to the 4s and the 450s to 500. So our top par 5 performers historically at Open Championships: Cam Young decimated the par 5s at St. Andrews last year. Lawrence, Tagala. Jordan L. Smith, only 1 for 2, but has been playing pretty darn well. Xander, 5 for 5, loves Open Championships. There's Stinson again, and Rory, Molinari. Minwoo Lee, 1 for 2. He never really rises much in my rankings. Minwoo Lee is somebody I've been eyeing fairly closely this week. Of course, Bobby McIntyre and his stellar performance at the Scottish last week. Morikawa. Matthew Southgate, 3 for 4. Nothing really inspiring in terms of average finish, but 3 for 4. Cam Smith, 4 for 5, technically the defending champion. Lucas Herbert, I mentioned last week at the Scottish. If the weather really gets bad, take a look at Lucas Herbert, and he made the cut. I don't remember what he did on the weekend. I know he was not near the top, but if the weather gets horrendous, you need to pay attention to Lucas Herbert. Schwartzel, Koepka, Scott. Your top par 5 performers there. All right, now finally, par 4s and 450 to 500 par 4. So our top par 4 performers in general: Cam Young, again, only once, but gained 10 last year at St. Andrews. Victor Hovland, 2 for 2. Jordan Spieth. Michael Kim, 1 for 1. There's Finau. Noren has played Open Championships well. Rory, defending champion at Hoylake, essentially. Bobby Mack. Zach Johnson, 2015 Open champion. Xander. Tommy. Danny Willett, 8 for 9. Not exactly the highest of average finishes, but 8 for 9. There's Taylor Gooch again, playing the par 4s well. He hadn't played the par 5s well, but he's played the par 4s well. Putnam, 1 for 1. Morikawa, Molinari, Rose, Scott, Lowry. There you go, there's that. And then lastly, in terms of looking at, gosh dang it, I hit the wrong button. Last thing, 450 to 5, at least last thing we're going to look at in the early look file: Cameron Young, Moronk, Morikawa, Molinex, Lawrence, Scheffler, Rory, Finau. Again, I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis in this because a lot of it is course-based, but the majority of par 4s here at Hoylake will be 450 to 5, so this is historically who has played 450 to 500 yard par 4s well in Open Championships in the past. All right, so I will bring this back to the average finish. But to round out the show, I will give you a little bit of an inside look at the research that I did today. If you want to see a lot of in-depth stuff, I ask that you give me a follow on Twitter and go see the 6 players on the PGA Tour that qualify under the criteria, the 4 players that would qualify if they had enough events. Again, if you want to see the exact criteria, I've put that on social media, Twitter and Instagram. Last night I showed you the form or the recent form of the previous winners. Let's take a look at some specific things around, say, the Open Championship. How much is Open Championship form necessary before you win? And I'm going to tell you, at least recency, it's not. But you will have needed to have some amount of success. So I call this the winner matrix. I collect the winners or the champions' performance at Open Championships up to the time they win. So, Morikawa I didn't collect last year because he had won in 2021. In fact, he is the outlier. He had never played the Open Championship before winning in 2021. Cam Smith had a decent amount of success, but Lowry had missed 4 straight Open Championships before winning in 2019. Molinari missed the cut in 2018. Rory missed the Open Championship prior to winning at Hoylake, Mickelson, and Ernie. But what you will see is that at some point, other than Morikawa, because he is the outlier, other than Morikawa, what you will see is that all of these winners have a top 20 at some point previously at an Open Championship. It doesn't have to be recent. I mean, look at Lowry, 5 years prior, but he at least had a top 20 performance. Molinari, sorry if you hear that, that's the ice maker going. Spieth, always been very good at Open Championships. Stinson's usually been very good. Recent form at the Open Championship isn't paramount, but you do need to have some amount of success in your history at the Open Championship, preferably a top 20, as that was Cam Smith's best performance. If you take out Cam Smith, most of these players have had a top 10. Lowry, Molinari, Spieth. Yeah, if you take out Cam Smith last year, every one of the players had at least a top 10. Take that for what you will. But recent form, not as much of a big factor. All right, how about performance leading up to the Open Championship? This is every champion's most recent tournament before the Open Championship. Of course, we don't get some stats like the U.S. Open, the Scottish last year, but for the most part, you've been in some excellent recent form. Now, Henrik Stenson missed the cut at the Players, but that was 2 months prior to the Open Championship. Phil Mickelson missed the cut at the Greenbrier, took a week off, and then comes and wins at Muirfield. He's actually the only one that didn't gain approach the tournament before. But generally, you're in really good form with approach. You're really good form with birdies gained. Only one player was negative in terms of birdies gained. But recent form is very, very important for champions here at the Open Championship. And if we expand that out just a little bit, every single one of these winners, with the exception of Henrik Stenson in 2016, every one of these winners has at least one top 15 within their past 2 starts. In fact, Morikawa had a second and a fourth. So 2 in his past 2 starts. 2018, that was Spieth? Now I have to cheat. Who was 2018? No, Molinari. So Molinari, he comes in with a win and a second, and then comes to the Open Championship and wins. 2015, Zach Johnson, a third and a sixth. So recent form, very paramount for the Open Championship. So if you want to see the full explanation and the full criteria, of the past 10 Open Champion winners and the players in the field this week that qualify under those criteria. That's been posted on social media over at Twitter and on Instagram. So take a look at your preferred social media site. I will bring you back to the 2023 field. Again, this is performance at all Open Championships going back to 2012. But that's going to do it for the Data Dive show for the Open Championship tonight. I want to thank everybody for jumping in chat. It was a lot of fun. Even the hazing, which is going to be very, very well deserved, especially after the round Thursday when I shoot about 138. But Awaken and P and Joey, thanks for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Thank you all to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and most of all subscribing. If you weren't here for the intro, a very, very heartfelt thank you. The channel hit 100 subscribers today. Very thankful for that. And we're going to see if we can't keep it going even through the good few and bad lot of recommendations I have for you all. But thanks to you three for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who supports the channel. Quick reminder, I will be live tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight, for the Barracuda full show. So if you have any interest in wagering on the Barracuda or playing the DFS contests for the Barracuda, be sure to check out that show tomorrow night. It'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be covering everything Barracuda. And, of course, Wednesday, the DFS Tactics, which we will have about 2 to 3 hours to finalize our lineups for the Open Championship. For all the wagers you have made so far this week for the Open Championship, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Open Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Barracuda full show, may all your bets be profitable. Thanks again for all the support.